So this is a segue. I share all these vignettes, and I know that this video is long. It's kind of like a declaration. It's kind of like a manifesto. It's really laying all the cards on the table and being transparent. And it was at this point I had just a complete clarity. Maybe I'll say epiphany, but it was a very big clarity of like putting my foot down, of just saying, I'm not doing this ever again. I'm not. And I called my mother twice, and I just shared with her my insight, and she shared with me she felt scared at the intensity of what I was talking about. And I just said, this comes from our family. This comes from family relationships. We have a history of attachment trauma that's not being talked about, and I am not going to act like this. My whole adult life, as I just shared with you all these vignettes, my whole adult life, I am not going to continue to have this play out. And I'm going to get to the bottom of this. I had been introduced to Love Addiction Anonymous, and although I don't resonate with the phrase addiction, because love addiction is not about addiction, it's about trauma. It's very much a misnomer. And there's a historical reason of it comes out of the 12-step groups, and originally people discovered these behaviors of attachment trauma through a addiction model, because it's for the most part, all addiction is linked to have some underlying trauma is there. And so these trauma symptoms are showing up in relationship. This attachment trauma is showing up in these meetings with people who also happen to be addicted to alcohol. And so they just linked this framework of addiction to these trauma symptoms that they're seeing, and they called it love addiction. It's very, very misleading for those of us who don't identify with addiction, although there is a component of the brain chemistry. Like when I'm dialing, at the phone at the corner of Berwyn and Broadway, and I'm dialing, I don't know if I said his name earlier, his name is Doug. So if I'm dialing Doug like, I'm really losing it, it looks like I'm addicted. It has a compulsivity to it. But we don't treat love addiction with addiction treatment. We approach it with trauma treatment. And in fact, it has nothing to do with you're not addicted to love. It's like, oh, you have attachment trauma, and these are the symptoms of hyperarousal, intrusion, and constriction, and a whole other series of symptoms or manifestations of how this shows up in your life. So I had been introduced to Love Addiction Anonymous before, and it also links to ACOA, Adult Children of Alcoholics, and my father happened to be a drinker, and we can identify, was an alcoholic. And also, what's interesting about Adult Children of Alcoholics is they say we sort of misname, it's oops, we're a bit premature in our naming of our organization. And in fact, we're more like adult children of dysfunctional families. And that's really what we're talking about. And the phrase adult children means as an adult, you have a limitation to handle life's distresses and or be able to be in your adult resourced self, that when you are distressed and life is throwing you a curveball and or you get involved in some kind of situation that simulates your childhood history, you might regress and only be operating from the skill set of when you were a child. And that because of trauma, you get disconnected from the other parts of yourself that are the more evolved, mature adult parts. So that's why they call it an adult child of alcohol, adult children of alcoholism, or they say adult children of a dysfunctional family. And it was at this time, I'm having this really strong clarity, epiphany. I made those 2 phone calls to my mother. I just said, no more. I'm getting to the bottom of this. I'm not going to date. I'm not going to date at all. And I'm going to an ACOA meeting. I'm going to that meeting. And in my mind, it was kind of May. It was kind of warm. I was in Philadelphia. I'm walking down Walnut Street. I'm on the way to Rittenhouse Square, this park. And it's kind of steamy, like balmy, like the beginning of spring, but it's a little humid. And I just had this strong clarity, like I'm taking my father. And I imagined holding my father's hand, and I felt so proud. I just said, Dad, I'm taking you to a meeting, and no one has ever taken you to a meeting, and no one introduced you to this information, and it stops with me, and I'm going, and you're going too. And I drug him there. Not gonna, in my mind, he wasn't resisting, but it's I was in charge. I was taking the lead. I am not going to let this attachment trauma and failed relationships and loneliness and longing and all these weird behaviors of protest behavior. No more. And it was at that moment I started making videos for YouTube. And in some weird, bizarre, prolific way, I made 170 videos. The weirdness means the volume. And my first video was about how love addiction is not about addiction. It's about, these are trauma symptoms. And we don't treat trauma with addiction treatment. We treat it with trauma treatment. And how ridiculously confusing it is to call it love addiction. There's more going on here. Let's frame it through the lens of trauma. That was like my first video. I created a Facebook group that was live for 2 years. I invested in that literally every single day. And then the evolution of the Facebook group is I moved that into the community program called Improve Your Relationships. And so continuing to make videos, I was talking about this openly in the Facebook group and then in the community program. And at this point in the story, it's about play therapy. I want to tell you about play therapy, which is a very interesting thing. But I've worked at a couple, as I said, agencies. And I don't work with kids, but I sat in on some therapists working with children who had some history of trauma. And the environment is a room with toys, and the child just shows up and, there's some talking, a little bit of talking, but mostly it's like, let's play. Let's just play. And the therapist is very, very removed. The therapist is not orchestrating or asking leading questions. The therapist is just observing. And if the kid wants the therapist to participate, the therapist will participate a little, but we want to not interfere with the child playing. And the child will tell their trauma story. It's really actually in the spirit of trauma reenactment. There's this part of us that we even in the child's play, the child starts reenacting the trauma story, and the child's going, I will show you the aspects of the trauma and the story and the details and the people and the players and my feelings, all through toys, all through the act of play. And it might be verbal, it might be nonverbal. The child could draw a picture and color a picture, and all of a sudden you see in the picture, like, oh my gosh, like that's the trauma dynamic. So I'm making 170 videos. I have no idea. I don't really have any clarity of or direction of why am I making videos. I'm not doing this as a content marketer. I don't have a product. I don't know how to build, a website and a funnel and landing pages and lead magnets and build a list and then convert people into sales. I'm just getting to the bottom of my attachment trauma. And people resonated with my videos. I did get some following. I did create the community. People joined. It was a product, and I'm making some money off of it. And I'm okay. I guess I'm a content marketer now. And at some point, I stopped making videos. I'm not going to fully say it dried up, but it just dried up, I guess. And it led me to really question what was the driver. Like, why did I make 170 videos with such clarity and prolific directness, and a lot of people resonate with those videos? And then I'm not making videos now. Like, what is happening? I started telling my trauma story through my videos without telling my trauma story. I didn't talk about me, but I did talk about the dynamics that I was living with and my understanding. You know, I receive comments on my videos where people say, oh, you must have really lived this, or the reason why this video is so offers such clarity is probably, you know, it sounds like you have gone through this, Alan. Like, yes. And so I'm talking about my family, but I'm not telling you I'm talking about my family. You could sort of figure it out. I'm talking about my relationship with my mother when I just say, you know, a parent and a child, or we see this dynamic in parent, you know, show up with how parents treat children. And I don't announce it, say, oh, by the way, I'm telling you a story about my relationship with my father and my relationship with my mother. But I'm drawing on that internally as I'm making the video. I knew at some point in making these videos that my mother would see them, or I would, you know, I felt fearful to name these dynamics because it's like telling the family secrets. And it felt very vulnerable and scary. And to think like, okay, well, what's going to happen if family members see this video? And very specifically, what's going to happen if my mother sees this video? And at some point, I think because maybe I think my mother followed me on Facebook, or, you know, she sort of figured out like, oh, Alan's making videos. So I brought it up, but there was never any clear direct, oh, you know, by the way, I'm making videos about attachment trauma and it really links to our family, and I'm actually really courting, revealing a lot about our family dynamics and what needs healing and intergenerational healing. Never said that directly, but like that's what I'm thinking. And at some point, my mother did watch some videos, and relatively quickly after me learning that, I realized she was not going to ask me any questions about it, and it did not register to her that this had anything to do with us, and that if it did, perhaps in the spirit of a kind of let's not open up something we don't want to open up, kind of like denial. There was no engagement around the content that I'm sharing that's so personal and so vulnerable. And then I'm getting thousands and thousands of messages and comments on YouTube saying, Alan, this resonates with me. Alan, I know this. Alan, you must be living this. Or, wow, Alan, you're in my head. So I stopped making videos, and what became apparent, what I realized, was think of play therapy, think of trauma reenactment, think of telling your trauma story through play. I was not playing with toys like play therapy. I'm playing with a video. And in a very quick, short period of time, I think I'm making videos to share on YouTube. I'm actually making videos to communicate to my mother. And I'm engaged in a kind of unconscious or not aware trauma reenactment of like really trying to like somehow, I was trying to get my attachment needs met through videos, and thinking like, well, if I can get millions of people, I mean, to date, this is like 6 months ago, like in total, like maybe 7 million views on my videos. So, there've been millions of views, and there's been, I don't know, hundreds of thousands, however many number of people who have left comments and said that, gave me praise, or said that the the message in the video touched them. They got it. There was something in my brain unconsciously that just said, well, all the times I attempted to reach my mother and talk about our family disconnect and attachment trauma, and I want our relationship to improve and change and be better and different, and can we have open, real conversations about this? And I know I'll make 170 videos and I'll communicate to you through video, and if I can do it in such a big, grand way, and that's a big component of attachment trauma. If you're insignificant, if you're not heard, if you don't matter, if you're not seen, you need to do more, bigger, bigger, and bigger. And so the way I did it, well, how big can I be? I'm going to make 170 videos on YouTube. Then we'll be able to have family repair and address the insecure attachment behaviors, the attachment wounds that are played out generationally in my family. My father happened to be adopted at age 5 from Germany. He clearly had an attachment wound, and that very much plays into, the family dynamics. So I stopped making videos because all this became conscious, and I said, wow, I'm using my mother as my wound as the muse, and I'm actually trying to communicate to my mother through YouTube, which, like all survival techniques and actions and behaviors, we say is genius, good for me. I mean, how incredibly genius is that as far as being creative and, keep trying. Well, what if I try this? What if I try this? So as much as I honor the need to trying to use some vehicle to explain what's going on, the conclusion is it doesn't work. It didn't work. And there was a profound crushing grief in the realization of what I was doing and trying to get my attachment needs met through YouTube videos to hopefully reach my mother, to acknowledge, if thousands and thousands of people will acknowledge that this speaks to them, this has to reach my mother. Now, this is all subconscious. I wasn't really fully aware, but it did come into awareness. And then I just felt a crushing grief of, no, I'm not gonna have the relationship that I want with my mother. I'm not gonna have the relationship I want in my family. And it's even doubly painful to be, not only is the wound around not being seen, I make 170 videos, which are very highly public, and I try to be seen, and I am seen by other people, but I'm not seen by the one person that I want to see me. So I didn't make videos for 3 years because initially I was coming into the consciousness of what the hell am I doing? And then once the grief hit and the crushing, the heartbreak of, Alan, this is not going to work. It's not working. Good for you for being creative, Alan, but you're not going to get repair. You're not going to get family repair. It's like heartbreak on top of heartbreak. It's like grief on top of grief. And then there's a great confusion of why am I still making videos about attachment trauma then? What? Am I just making them, to give away for free they're helpful to, I know they're helpful. So here, I don't get anything in return. This is the wound speaking. But, the way it sets up in my brain for the 3 years I didn't make videos is I'm not going to get what I really want, which is to make videos in a way that help me heal my attachment trauma. Instead, what happened was it just illuminated even more the dead end lack of repair, and that I'm not going to get any type of relationship with my mother or my family. So it's really hard to then know, why am I making videos? Because it then feels like I'm depleted. There's not an energetic balance where I'm being nourished. So I did attempt multiple times to try to make videos, and it really felt exhausting, outrageously exhausting. When I was no longer linked to the wound as the muse, as an attempt of hope, an innocent hope to communicate to my mother, once that whole infrastructure was blown out and no longer the dynamic, it was just me operating out of fumes and low energy and trying to force to create a video to give away to, people, community at large, to give away to people out there, and I don't get anything back. Again, that phrase, I don't get anything back, that's the language of the attachment wound, because I get a lot back. And, and when I'm in my grounded, non-wounded adult self, I see the big picture of resources. There's still the protest behavior around, but I'd really like to have a relationship with my mother. But you're not. It's not going to happen. Third time I'm saying this video is long. There's 2 more pieces to this video as I continue a series of vignettes and stories that really come to a complete transparency of who I am, where all this came from, and where it's going.